An AI tutor. I'll just restart. Welcome everyone to Building an AI Tutor with Google Tools by Sean McConnell. Sean is a software engineer in the registrar's office with over 10 years of experience building technical solutions in higher ed. He's currently focused on building secure integration solutions, leveraging AI agentic engineering for student data on AWS. If you have any questions for Sean during his presentation, feel free to put them in the chat. But without further ado, building an AI tutor with Google Tools.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and good morning, everyone. Welcome. Hope you are enjoying the conference so far, and I'll be talking about how you can build an interactive, self-iterating tutor with Google Tools. This was originally Google Gemini, but Google decided to cancel that last week, which is super fun, but that's okay because the kind of method that I'll show you how to use AI and interact with it does work with pretty much any tool. So we'll use Google Tools today, but I hope that it will be interesting and educational uh, session for you. And yeah, like um, Elizabeth said, if you have questions during it, go ahead and put them in chat. There'll be a couple times throughout this presentation where we're waiting for AI to write something, so I'll kind of use that to answer questions as we go. And without further ado, here we go. On the agenda, we'll talk about which AI tools should I learn. I know I've heard from a lot of people that it's kind of difficult right now trying to figure out what's the best tool to learn. A little bit of fear of like specializing in one and then it gets like canceled, like Gemini CLI was, or like Claude Code, like they've been raising a lot of the prices recently. So kind of talking about which tools to learn and how to best utilize the way that you can invest your time that way. And then I'll show how I'm using an AI tutor, and then a good way that you can flip the script on AI, where instead of telling it to do something, and then it just kind of runs wild and does something that's not exactly aligned with what you want, you can instead have it ask you questions about what you want until it gets to a working understanding of it. We'll go over a working live demo. Maybe that's a foolish idea, but we'll see how it goes. We'll do a live demo and can say a prayer to the Wi-Fi gods that we're all okay. And we'll talk about some security with this as well. That's always something that we need to talk about with AI. And then at the end, I'll do building a tutor from scratch. I know this session will be saved and recorded, so I'm hoping that will be a good resource that you can come back to later if you want. If you'd like to build some of this, you can see like the step-by-step instructions on how to do that. I will need some audience participation for the last one. I'll ask what topic we want to build a tutor for, whether that's learning AWS or GCP, Docker, Spanish, like whatever you want to tutor for. I'll go ahead and build it live at the end and we'll see how it goes and we can ask questions and do something good here. So just to kind of talk about the problem about which AI tool, there's new models and tools that are coming out like every week sometimes. It's kind of overwhelming. You're not sure which one to use. There's like hundreds of options. The payment plans are changing. GitHub Copilot changed their payment plans this last week. All the token costs are kind of going up across the board. There's a lot of hidden system prompts, like when you're interacting with ChatGPT in the web, it can act very differently depending on when you use it or what patch they've put out that day or not. So I'll go into how to kind of see those system prompts and even edit some of them and add some instruction prompts yourself. And I was having trouble when I started using these tools, and I've been using them since the beginning, back in about 2022, starting with GitHub Copilot when it was kind of just a really fancy autocomplete for code. I'd found that it was a little inconsistent, especially when you have like multiple chat threads, like in ChatGPT. So we'll talk about how to make it a little bit more of a consistent tool that you can add to your tool belt. And we'll talk about what could work better, especially better than browser-based AI. So some of the problems with these, there's long chat threads, they might get lost. You always have to kind of enter the same messages of, hey, be concise. Don't give me an essay of output. Always list references and docs. That's one that is like key to using an LLM, I think. You have to say, hey, don't just assert that something is true. Give me a link to actual documentation. That really will reduce the hallucination rate because if it has to go do a web search and find a real document, usually it'll be pretty good about that. And then some of the long running chats, they can fill up the context window and they make the models feel dumb. And that's maybe a not the right word for it, and we'll go into it a little bit more of exactly why the models kind of fall off a cliff the longer they get. And some of the problem is there's no memory of previous decisions with AI in the browser. When you come back to it, you kind of have to start from scratch again, and you have to re-explain everything. So a lot of developers, a lot of even just technical, non-technical people that use it, I've seen they have like a large prompt document. They'll do a lot of copy paste. They'll like copy paste huge prompts into ChatGPT every time. And yeah, I'll just show you a better way to do that. So the solution, very simply, is to give AI access to your file system. I'll be talking about Gemini CLI and Anti-Gravity CLI, both by Google today. But when you give those access to your file system, the reason that you can do this and the reason it's a good idea, and there's a few reasons it's a bad idea. We'll get into the security things later, but it creates a permanent record. Instead of there being all of these black box ideas out there in some AI system, it's actually just written to your file system. So you can see it, you can understand what's going on. You can edit those files, you can have the LLM edit those files as well. And it creates a permanent record that you can then version yourself. You can easily resume. I'll show how to do that. It is self-iterating. So there's the Gemini.md file or a Claude MD file, and those are the instruction files that are loaded in every time by default. And we can actually let the agent update its own instruction file. And it'll kind of do that in a loop, and so it'll get better the longer we use it. When you give it access to your file system, it can read and write files, which is super handy. It's LLM agnostic, meaning that you can use Claude, Claude Code, GitHub CLI, Gemini, you can use Codex. All of these will work. And it works in the same way because we're using the file system, and all of them kind of interact in the same sort of way. And the file system is searchable. So developers are using this a lot right now. I'm using that as a software engineer to be able to say like, hey, there's a bug in this particular element in a web page. Go search through and figure out where it is. And then I can do like a grep search throughout my like file system and then find the line of code that references that element and then go make a change. And that's where it's able to do the kind of agentic work where it goes out and does things without needing hand holding every time. And the wonderful thing about this is you can version it. When you're using code, developers tend to use Git. We can use Git to version. Also, this is just going to be a folder on our file system. So you can put it in a OneDrive, a Box folder, whatever you like, and it will be versioned so that you can come back to it. And if Google makes some big update like they did last couple of weeks with they had their big yearly event, Google. And sometimes when they do that, they will just blow away all of your chat history. And if you were on Gemini version 1, now you're on Gemini version 3 point whatever, some of those chats go away. With this system, it's all in the file system. So you've got control of it and you're not going to lose those long running chats. So let's talk about why the models start to feel a little dumber as you use them. This is from an excellent research article. I've got the link down below, and all links are going to be at the end of this. I'll have a link to my slides so that you can just grab those at the end if you like. But this graph on the y-axis, what we're looking at is how intelligent the model is, like how good it is at reasoning. And then on the right side, on the x-axis, is how many input tokens have been put into the model. So you can see this is a chart of Claude, GPT, Qwen, and Gemini. And the more context they get, they eventually all fall off a cliff, right around the 60 to 70% mark. It's not when the context window is full, it's when it's almost full, is when all of the models start performing way less. And you can't see that when you're using like ChatGPT in a browser. So the context, think of this as the memory of the LLM. It's like RAM in a computer. Now, when it does get pretty full, most of these models will do something called compaction. It will make a summary of everything that's currently in the context window, delete all the things it thinks you don't need, and then pass it off to a fresh version of the LLM with a fresh context window. And it will reduce your context usage from like 80 to 90% of your context window down to like 20%. And then you can keep going and continue the chat. It would be really nice to know when those things happen and when the context window is getting full, where it's at exactly. And let me scoot over so you can see past my head on this. There we go. It'd be nice to know when those things are happening. So I'll show a method that you can use to make that happen. So just to explain the context window a little bit real fast, the context window is the total context used of the tokens of each of these added together. So it's not just the chat that you're sending up and back to the LLM. It's a combination of the system prompts, the instruction file, all of the tool calls it's making. So that's like reading and writing files. If it reads a file, it reads the whole file, or it can read like lines of a file into its context window and add it there. Or it might do a web search and then add a whole web page into its context window. And then you've got the chat history. There's a good link down here I've got. It kind of explains how characters get converted into tokens. It's not a one-to-one. So if I typed in like how many tokens are in this thing, that string, that list of characters right here has 8 tokens in it. And tokens are just words that are kind of compacted down into something that the model can understand. So the tokens is the number of characters ish. Tokens will always be a little less than the number of characters because it does some kind of smart things with how it compacts it from English down to like binary. So I've got some installation instructions here. I'm using Obsidian for the text editor, and we're going to use Gemini CLI at first. I wouldn't worry about the Gemini CLI install right here because that's getting shuttered on June 6th. So I'll show the new version, which is anti-gravity CLI. But Obsidian is just a free open source text editor. It's really nice. I like to use it because it's good for editing markdown files, which is what a lot of these LLMs like to use. And it will just look like a normal text document when we get to it. So once you log into Gemini CLI, it is a terminal tool. So you'll have to open terminal, but you really only have to run this one command. Once you run Gemini, it will act just like an LLM that you're used to in a browser, except it'll be running on your file system. It'll prompt you to log in to Google the first time. If you connect this to your UW-Madison Google tenant account, it will use the agreement that we have with Google to not use our chats for any of their training. So we do have an agreement in place with Google that we can log in with our NetID like Google account, and that is sanctioned currently by Do It. It's okay for general use, and but by all means, definitely do not be putting sensitive information into any of this. Just a disclaimer there. Okay, so the Obsidian setup, we're going to create a vault. Obsidian, it's important to know that you need to open Obsidian in a folder. It'll have access to all the files in that folder. So a vault is just a folder where you run Gemini and Obsidian. So we'll open on the left-hand side, we'll have Obsidian running in a folder, and we'll have Gemini running in the same folder. And then we'll be able to edit the files and have our AI edit the same files, and we'll be able to work back and forth in that way. So I've been using this to create a new subfolder for each project. So like a tutor for learning AWS Cloud Practitioner. I took an exam for that recently, and I use this system to help me study for that test. And then when you start out, you do have to kind of rizz up the AI a little bit. You need to give it a pep talk. That's kind of just the common practice for whatever reason. That's what everybody seems to do when they make these agents. They say like, you are a strong and wonderful person, those old motivational tapes. You kind of got to do something similar and say like, hey, you are the best AWS tutor ever. You're good at giving documentation. You're good at encouraging. You kind of explain what you want it to be. And then once you get that into the context window, you just ask it, all right, now that I established what I want you to be, go ahead and add this into an instructions file, which is that Gemini.md file for Gemini. And there's Claude for Claude Code, and agents is what OpenAI uses. All of those are kind of interchangeable. It's just the default file that these different LLMs will look at. For the initial tutor creation, there's one line that I would always recommend adding to every instruction file. It's this one here. Always update Gemini.md after every major decision, rule change, or session milestone to ensure state persistence and consistent tutoring behavior across all future interactions. What it does when you add that is that it will keep itself up to date. So if while you're working with it, you say, hey, I really like it when you're giving me multiple choice tests. You say, hey, I want multiple choice A, B, C, D with clickable buttons. It'll say, got it. and then it'll write it to the Gemini MD file. And every time you use this going forward, it will remember that. You can also customize the AI. I got a little tired of it being somewhat sycophantic, I think is a good way to describe how a lot of the AI models will behave. It will always say things like, "You're absolutely right," even if you're absolutely wrong. And it will do silly things like tell you that everything's all right or be too overly kind. So I added a line in my Gemini MD file for this tutor to say, be a little bit harsh. Don't just say I'm doing a good job if I got a 2 out of 10 on a test. So this is a screenshot from one of it, and it even calls out. It says, "Brutal critic, per the mandates in your Gemini MD file, I have provided harsh feedback in the test file regarding your repeated mistakes." And it gave me homework. It said mandatory remediation because you missed the same question multiple times. You've got to go do this homework and then make sure that it's working before I'll provide you any future evaluations. If you don't like all that kind of sass in your agent, you can also limit it as well. All right, so let's move on to a demo of this system. So this is my desktop. I've just got a folder out here. I've named Gemini Land, and within that, I have AWS Tutor. So this is the scary part for some people. You have to open Terminal, but in Windows, you just right click, and that is Terminal. Then we'll open Obsidian on the left. On the bottom left, you'll see right here is all the vaults you have, which are just different folders. And then I've got my AWS Tutor folder over here. The only thing you have to do in Terminal is just type in Gemini, then you hit enter. And I will say, since they announced the closing of Gemini, it's been going a little slow. So hopefully it won't go too slow. All right. So there we go. We've got Gemini running on the right. Once you've launched it in Terminal, you can pretty much just treat this like any AI chat session you've ever used. The only difference is that because it's running in this specific folder, it knows to go look for a Gemini MD file like this one. So I don't have to give it a bunch of context. I can just ask it, "Where are we at?" And let's see what it does. It's thinking. It goes out and reads some files. So it reads my test 8, it reads the study plan, it read all 14 items in the folder. And this is like when people talk about agentic work, like this is an agent. It's able to go out and make decisions, do things on the file system, and then it will make actions based on that. So it comes back and says, "We're at a critical failure point. You just bombed test 8 with a 1 out of 10. Even worse, you've regressed a foundational concept like IAM roles and support plans that we've covered multiple times. According to the mandated remediation assignment in test 8, your progress is currently blocked." So it's not going to give me more tests until I go do my homework that it assigned to me. And it says that I need to go write something about regions, availability zones, and edge locations. It says, "Stop guessing and start studying. Once you've created that file, I'll review it." Okay, so why is it acting this way? I can see all of these all these files on the left-hand side. And the latest test was test 8, which I generated this morning. I ran it. I intentionally kind of failed it. So I'm going through and just marked a bunch of wrong answers, did a terrible job, and yeah, the AI is being a little bit rude to me, isn't it? Absolutely not. AZ is inside a region. Now, it's doing this because in its instruction file right here, the Gemini MD file, I told it how I want to be taught. And I told it, especially in the interaction style, be fun, encouraging, and concise. Tests should contain 10 questions. They should be multiple choice. But I added this line here. It says, "If a user gets the same question wrong multiple tests in a row, act like a brutal critic of them and be harsh." So because I added that line, it's going to be a little bit harsh with me while I'm especially failing some of these. So I don't feel like doing all the homework right now live in front of all of you. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete test 8. And I'm going to check down here. There's this line in the Gemini MD where it says, "Test 8 was graded. You did terrible." Let's go ahead and delete that as well. So I'm editing the instruction file right now. Now, if I go back over here and try to have it generate me another test, it still has the context that was just loaded in there. So we want to clear the context. So there's a command for that. It's just /clear. So that wipes out the whole context, and now we're in a fresh session of Gemini. So I can ask it again, make me a new test. And it will know because it should right now go read the Gemini MD file, pull that into its context window, and yep, there you go. It's read the folder, it's found all the files in there, and then it should go make me a new test based on where I'm at. And this is one of those points where we are waiting for it. So by all means, if you have questions, put them in chat. I'll kind of be watching it and I'll totally answer any questions you have. All right, so this is some of the security things it will ask most times before it goes and writes a file. I'm going to say allow for this session. You get write access Gemini within this folder. So it went out and wrote a test for me. Looks like it wrote test 9, which is interesting. So there we go. I'm not going to read through this. I'm just going to quickly fill out and click random things in this test just to kind of do a quick demo and show how this system works when it's all put together. And at the very end, we will build a full tutor from scratch. And there's even instructions at the bottom telling me how to do this. So yeah, it's like running into file inconsistencies, it looks like. So it tried to add back in the thing that I erased. That's interesting. Okay, so I'll tell it finished test 9, please grade it. And it's already got instructions in the MD file about how to grade the tests and how I want that to look. And I've told it if I get something wrong, don't just say, hey, this is wrong. I want it to say why it's wrong and also give me links to documentation so that I can go study them. So this will run and it will read through the changes that I made to this file, like when I selected each of these multiple choice answers, and then it should grade it for me. There it goes. So I got 4 out of 10, and not bad for randomly clicking. So it tells me what the correct answer was, and it gives an explanation. And apparently it's getting a little frustrated with me because I keep just filling out random tests. So, uh, good question from Chris. I'll address that right now because when he asks, this is very cool. Do you ever worry about the model coming up with incorrect test questions / answers? Maybe it's better with some topics than others. So, yeah, it's definitely better with some things. I added something in the instruction file to say if I get something wrong, you need to give me a link to the documentation. So this is a deep dive on IAM roles, and it just is a deep link straight to AWS documentation. And then I can go verify myself, like, oh, this is how IAM roles do work. And then I can go back to the test and fix it that way. I've had it generate bogus documentation once, and it did something like it's like an Internet Archive link, but I've never seen it do that more than once. It's not a personal plan. It's just the UW-Madison Google account that I have, and I haven't paid for any of it. It's just what comes free right now. I will say, you can't really see it behind my head. I can move my icon for a second, but there is a quota down here in the bottom right. It's not like it's free up to a certain point. I think like you get a free amount of tokens per day kind of idea. So that's the first demo of just kind of how the system is currently working. I'll hop back into my presentation and continue on now. And yes, I have a full link to all of my slides at the very end of this that is live, and I just put like a read-only version out there that anybody can use and just copy paste. So this is how you can change how AI behaves. You write it in that Gemini MD file, and that's where I put the interaction style, the persistence and state, because I put that line at the very bottom saying, hey, keep Gemini MD up to date. When we worked with this, you might notice it actually went out here and edited Gemini MD at the very end. So it was editing itself and self-iterating while I'm working with it, which is great. And it's all in English. You just declare what you want it to do in these MD files, in these markdown files. I told it the grading standards I want, the test creation, and these are living files that you and the LLM can interact with. It's not hidden in a black box in some chat application that you can't really see. It's just right there on your file system, which I think is great. And then I made like the document-based assertions to reduce hallucination. So that's where it has to have those links. If I get something wrong, it has to give me a link and prove why it thinks I was wrong so that I'm not just uh, learning something that the AI hallucinated and getting it wrong on the tests. And I added the emoji grading. There's a few other visual things you can do with Obsidian. I can show some of that in the demo at the end. You can even have it, it uses a system called Mermaid, where it uses Markdown to generate like full diagrams and visual aids that will help. So um, this is kind of the key to make it self-improving. It's this plan, delegate, assess, codify loop that you can go through with AI agents. And there's a link at the bottom there. Really good article on how to make this happen. But in general, the first stage that you want to do is make a plan. Instead of just saying, hey, go do this for me, a really good way to do that is to flip the script. There's a really good skill out there called the grill me skill, where you say, hey, agent, interview me, ask me what I want something to be. And then the agent will ask you like a series of questions and go down every branching path so that by the end of it, you get to a shared understanding and then it builds something that you've actually aligned it with yourself. Second step is to delegate. So in a fresh context window, a lot of times I'll make the plan in its own plan.md file and say, hey, I want to go build out this new feature in code if I'm writing this with code. Like I want to add a new page to a website. Make out a plan for me, which is basically a PRD, like a document saying everything that should be in there. And then I delegate it to a fresh context window that's got the highest level of intelligence on the graph because there's nothing in the context yet. And I tell it, read this plan and then go implement it. The next step is to assess. You test it. Whatever the results are, you have to have some kind of test in place. It can't just you can't just let the AI spit stuff out and assume that it's good. There needs to be some kind of testing there. In code, this is really easy because you'll put something about like you can put unit tests, integration tests, all of that is really helpful to make sure that the output is clean and it's good. And with coding, we'll do things like human in the loop developer reviews as well. And then codify. That's the last and most important step. If it's done something you like, you need to tell it like, this is great. Remember this. Keep doing this. And either have it write it to the Gemini MD file, but because that Gemini MD file is loaded in context every single time, if it gets really long, it will fill up your context window. So a lot of developers are starting to use something called skills, which is just you kind of make another folder, another file called a skill for, like I could make a skill for grading tests, a skill for creating tests, and it would only load those into context as it's needed, like at runtime, so that the context window stays small and the agent stays as intelligent as you can get it. And then, yeah, like this line right here, adding that will help it to be self-improving. So like the longer you use it, the more aligned it will get to what you like. So yeah, Google Gemini got canceled. That was super fun about a week ago. I ended up changing the title for this presentation and everything. But Google canceled Gemini CLI and they're moving to anti-gravity CLI, which is sort of annoying, especially for making a presentation on this. But no worries, because since we're using this system, it's just going to work out of the box. And the anti-gravity CLI is a lot easier to install. You don't need Node.js. All you have to do is run this one line in PowerShell, and it will install anti-gravity command line for you. And there's Mac, Linux, Windows one-line installs right there. Okay, so let's see a demo of Google Anti-Gravity real quick. Okay, so I'm just in terminal here. I'm still in this folder. See past my head. Yeah, yep. So the command is just AGY for anti-gravity CLI. So we run that. It goes out and signs into my UW-Madison account, which we can see here. and then I've got it running on Gemini 3.5 Flash, and it's running in this folder. So let's just see how it does. Let's ask it the same kind of question. Where am I at? No additional context. Let's see how it does. So the first thing it does is it lists all the files, and then it reads right there the Gemini MD file. That's like the default file that all of the Google ones will use. Gives me a progress report, tutor's assessment. I'm going to be completely honest. Your recent performance is a disaster. Going 2 out of 10, 1 out of 10, and 4 out of 10 on your last three tests is unacceptable. You are repeatedly failing on the exact same foundational concepts. I would like to point out at this point that I've just been kind of randomly filling this out while I'm working on this demo. I did actually pass my test, so we're all good. I don't really use this too much anymore. Um, so that's really cool. It's got everything we need in the file system. It didn't need any additional context. I didn't need to paste in a long prompt. I can just keep using this, and it's a consistent tool that I can come back to like weeks or months later whenever I'm ready to start learning more about AWS. Also, it's a proof right here that because we can just plug in anti-gravity, you can also use codecs right here from OpenAI. You can use Claude Code. It'll work the same way. You can go use GitHub CLI. All of these major AI platforms do have a command line version of this that us coders have been using for a lot of things, but you don't just need to use it for code. You can use it for things like these MD files that are just human readable English. Oh yeah, there's a lot of things that have been killed by Google. Rest in peace, Google Glass. All right. So that's the anti-gravity demo, and I'll move on to a quick talk about security. Um, I've done a longer talk on this. I can definitely get more into this. When you're programming, we'll have a lot of things that are stored in .env files, like passwords and all of that. If you give AI access to your file system, it will happily go read a password file and send it right up to Google servers and do the processing up there, which we absolutely don't want to happen. Like that's a huge security risk. Something that will help is you can put in the Gemini MD file, you can say, you are never allowed to read .env files. Don't even try. Your mileage will vary. It will usually honor that request, but sometimes it won't. It will usually honor anything that's in a .gitignore file. So if you're coding, we put things in that gitignore list that we don't want to ever be committed to version history. We don't ever want to be pushed up to the cloud, such as passwords, secure things, keys, API keys, and also just large files like a node modules folder. So sandboxing is sort of the better way to do security at this point. You run it in its own kind of sandboxed shell. You can use something like Docker to do this, which runs like a container, and then you can run all of the tools within a container. Um, it is not trivial to set up. It's actually fairly difficult to set that up. You can do it, and that's usually how I've been doing this when I've been using these tools while I'm writing code. Um, I have a free and open article. I guess it's like a Git repository here, linked at the bottom, that shows how you can do that. And I think it's publicly available. You shouldn't need like a Git login or anything to see it, but that explains how you can use Docker to sandbox the LLM. Okay, looks like we got about 20 minutes left, so I'm going to use the rest of this time to be able to kind of build a tutor from scratch. So I'm going to need some audience participation. If you want to post something in chat, would you please just put something in there saying, let's build a tutor for this, and I'll go ahead and pick one that I see a lot of. Lucas. Yeah. At UW, we do have access to 1Password, and there's a CLI tool you can use to inject credentials at runtime. That's probably the best way to handle that. I know there's like a VS Code plugin for 1Password as well. I've been looking into that, but I haven't implemented it quite yet. That's a great idea. That's probably like the best way to do that right now. Learn about cell organelles at elementary level in Spanish. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay. Um, basic math. All right, I'm going to pick math. And let's go with calculus because I have no idea how to do calculus anymore. There's a link to the presentation. I'll put that up at the end. Okay, so let's close Obsidian, minimize everything, and I'm going to start from scratch and kind of show how we would build a basic mathematics tutor. So this is on my file system. I'm just going to add a new file, new folder here. We're going to call it math tutor, and it's empty folder. So right click, open in terminal, and we'll launch. I'm going to use anti-gravity. It's been a little bit faster than Gemini. So, okay, it asks if you trust this folder. So say yes, you're allowed to make edits here and read and write and everything. I'll open up Obsidian. And we should have our math tutor right over here. So now I'll tell it, you are the greatest math tutor ever. Teach me basic calculus using tests and visual aids. You are using Obsidian and .md files to interact with me. Ask me 5 questions about how you should function before you start to ensure alignment. All right, so it asks me a few questions, and oh, this is nice. It gives me like multiple choice. What teaching style and tone fits you best? Highly encouraging, rigorous and formal, game-like and puzzle-oriented. That sounds like fun. Let's do that one. How should we pace and structure the curriculum? Let's go interactive practice. What format do you prefer? Let's do Obsidian. What tests and quizzes should be formatted and graded? Better inside this. Let's do separate test markdown files. Where would you like to start our calculus journey? Oh boy. I'm gonna test my calculus knowledge in real time. Let's start with pre-calc foundations. It's been a long time since I took a calculus class. Okay. So it's requesting permission to run Python. That's interesting. Sure, you can run Python. It's only running in this folder, so it's probably going to use that to, oh yeah, it's doing like matplotlib, and it's going to create some visual aids that way. Yes, you can run Python. That's okay. You can see it's asking a bunch of permissions to run all this stuff. There's a way that you can bypass that. I know the command with Gemini was you run Gemini dash dash YOLO to run it without any permission checking. I think Claude's is like dash dash dangerously skip permissions. I'm not sure what anti-gravity's is yet. It just came out with it like last week. So, all right. So we've got to start here. Lesson 1. It's even got links to something. It's interesting. It's asking if it can generate Python plots. That's all right. And it made a character profile for me since this is a gamified tutor. That's fun. Then there's links within Obsidian. So this is a nice thing about Obsidian. It can link between documents. So that link took me from the start here into what is calculus. And it gives me the nice visual aids that are here, which is great. I think you can edit it. So yeah, this is the markdown, but then Obsidian renders it as a nice visual thing that makes it good. Yeah, the YOLO thing is hilarious. Programmers have a sense of humor. Don't let anybody tell you differently. Okay, so it's given me some ideas about what to study. It's even got some nice graphs, some nice visual aids. I can work through this. Say, okay, great. Add a Gemini.md file. so that you can keep track of where we are at. Then I'll just go copy and paste that line that I said was really good to add. So create a Gemini MD, and then at the bottom, wow, there's a lot of emojis in here. I don't know that I really like that. So remove all emojis from, you can do like at file. So you can type like at and then start typing a file name and it'll autocomplete. So I can say, hey, remove all the emojis from here, keep the token use small. Cool. So I cleaned up my Gemini file because we want to keep the token small here. And so it's telling me I'm level one, I have zero experience. All right, great. Um, so it looks like I made a lesson for me. Say, okay, ready for my first test. Make it multiple choice, 5 questions, and use emojis to rate it. Um, make the choices clickable in Obsidian. Okay, so there's an answer key up here. That's interesting. I don't know if I really want that to exist, but I can edit that later. Oh, they're clickable. Oh, weird. Okay. So it gave me like a link to the answers and says, nope, A is incorrect. So it's doing like a choose your own adventure kind of thing. That's fun. So given the function fx equals 3x squared, what is the average slope, second line slope between the function? Oh, goodness gracious. Hey, look, B is correct. Great. Then we can return to test. That's fun. I haven't seen it do that before. So it made like a choose your own adventure thing where you can hop between different files within Obsidian. And we can learn calculus that way. The limit of a rational function with a whole. Say it's undefined. Ah, wrong. Okay. So you get the idea. And you can see the nice visual aids. I will say Obsidian is great with any kind of mathematical notation. It uses something under the hood. I forget the exact name of it, but I want to say it's like the latex formula language that will do all of that. Boy, that's really hard to read, isn't it? So I can just tell it. Question 5 on test 1 is unreadable. Fix the output, make the choices line different line for A, B, C, and D. So what's nice is if it's not really working, or if something is odd, like it looks like it didn't render the latex exactly correct here, you can just tell it, like, hey, this looks bad, please change. And there you go. I believe you can, I know with Claude Code you can do screenshots. I'm not sure if you can with anti-gravity, so let's just try it in a live demo real quick. It'll probably break on me, but no, you can't upload images here. Okay. This is absolutely confirming I've forgotten calculus as well, Keevan. I am apparently limits are a thing. Okay. So there's lots of assets here. Talked about this is what a limit hole looks like, approaching from left and right. There's a slope tangent, and these are PNG assets that it generated. So it generated these pictures, which is great. So now I'll just tell it, this is great. Make sure you save this so I can come back to it later. Everything's been saved directly here. And then make sure the Gemini update file is updated too. Cool. So yeah, double check the Gemini MD file and it's making sure that it's still updated. So it keeps track of my XP, which is great. That's fun. So I can level up, and this has made it like a gamified way to learn calculus in this manner. I've had a lot of good mileage. If I'm having trouble understanding something, I can tell it to just generate me a nice image. So let's see. I'm having trouble understanding second slopes. Please make me a diagram in a new file called second slope.md. Use obsidian and mermaid to and whatever else to explain it to me. So if you want to add a few visual aids, you can say, hey, please generate something in a visual aid to explain this to me. So it looks like it's created its own script to run Python in the background to generate files. Oh, wow. Yeah. So it's right using Python scripts to create .pngs and pictures. So that's what it did here to visually understand the second slope. Secant slope? I don't know. There we go. So let's talk about skills for a minute. I think that'd be helpful. You use Python to make these. Um, Save that in a skill file, this directory. So skills we talked about a little bit before are like, we don't want everything to just be stuck in that Gemini MD file because it will take up our context and we'll run into context rot. So I'll tell it, hey, make a skill file for this. Don't load that every time. Just make a separate skill so that you can load it in at runtime if you need to. So it created plotskills.py, which it's not going to load in Obsidian because it's not an MD file, but I'll bet you it's out here. Yep. So we've got a skill file written in Python that our AI tutor can now use to be able to generate visual aids for us, which is great. There's lots of other things you can do. Um, we can take a little time for Q&A now for the last 10 minutes or so, and I'm happy to answer any questions. This is a link to my website, but if you scroll down, there's a link to the presentation with everything you can copy and paste there. So any questions, feel free to jump on the chat or feel free to unmute yourself and ask. I'm here and available to talk for a little while.
I just put a link in the chat to the QR code. What a cool website, by the way. And what an awesome presentation. Thank you so much for sharing this. Um, we have about 12 minutes for questions if anyone has anything that they are looking to ask about or to see demoed again. I was curious if there were any visualizations in Obsidian. I use it for D&D planning, and I was curious if it ever took advantage of that feature. Um, and it's a little
Oh,
gimmicky, it's a little fun, but
oh, cool. You used to like generate maps and stuff for D&D or?
I actually use it to keep track of all of my world, like all of the locations and NPCs, and then I can see links between everything. It creates a sort of visualization of how everything is connected. Um, I, it's one of the features that I saw as a selling point for Obsidian, and I'm curious if it's something you've ever taken advantage of. But
No, I haven't. That sounds super cool. Is that the thing where it makes like the big knowledge graph that goes everywhere, right? Like,
yes, yeah. You do
that's
have
just, I mean,
to set it up with like little tags though, so it could be something fun to explore as you fine-tune things. It's more of a celebratory, like, let's look back and see all the things that we did than a more functional tool. But
remember what it's called in Obsidian? I'm trying to remember. I've seen that before, but I haven't used it yet.
think it's the map view.
I'll give anti-gravity a shot at it, see if it can figure it out. Created calculus quest map.canvas. Okay. Oh, there we go.
Ooh.
I think yeah, wow. I've really only used Obsidian because I usually use VS Code for a lot of it, doing all coding. But yeah, that's a really cool feature. I didn't know that. Thank you. Yeah.
And over in the top left, it's like three dots making a little Y. I think that's where it is too. Where in the graph view. Heck
Ooh,
yeah.
look at that. Oh, I did make a Spanish tutor at one point. I wonder I have to probably have to open just this folder in Obsidian to do that. That's pretty cool. Oh yeah, that showed it, didn't it? All the like connections between the start here and everything. Yeah,
Heck yeah.
that's awesome. Thanks for showing me that.
For sure. Well, thank you for showing us all of this. This is really awesome.
Yeah, happy to. I built in a little bit of time just seeing all the AV issues everybody had yesterday. So I'm happy to hang around and chat, but I think the time slot ends at 10:40, right? So
Yep. Yeah.
cool.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions, clearly a very straightforward, understandable, wonderful presentation. If we could have another round of applause for Sean. Thank you so much for this. This was really awesome. I just realized my camera's still off. Oh well. Thank you again, Sean, for this wonderful talk. We can go ahead and wrap up a little bit early, give everyone some time before our next session. It'll begin in about 10 minutes. Oh, well, about 20 minutes now. Go ahead, refill your coffees, grab some drinks, or again, in the chat, we'll put Sean's website if you'd like to go check out some of his work.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.